What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, and I just wanted to do a video today about taking prisoners during SHTF and why you may need to do that during an SHTF or WROL Tiatawaki situation. So I recently uploaded a video about flex cuffs and restraints and why you need to have them in your bug out kit, in your get home bag. You should have some around your house. You should have some at your bug out location. You should have them readily available, easy to access. And the reason why is because you may need to take someone prisoner. And why would you need to take someone as a prisoner during SHTF? There's a lot of reasons, but you have to think about the situation with the police and rule of law being suspended. If there's ever like a long-term SHTF situation or without rule of law, obviously we've talked about this many times, and it's been talked about on multiple survival channels and different books. But it's common knowledge that police services will be much greatly diminished, as they are now during rule of law. So, like right now, if you call 911, let me give you a good example. Right now, if you call 911 and you say that somebody's, breaking into your house, or you've had a guy break into your house, and you scared him off, if you did that now, the police would probably show up, inside of 15 minutes, depending on how densely populated your area is and how many police officers there are working in your area, and the geographic location and how spread out their jurisdiction is, but inside of 15 minutes, you're gonna get at least one deputy or one police officer, and maybe more. But if we're talking about post SHTF, where many police officers may not even be able to come to work, especially if they have to take care of their own families, their own wives, their own children. They're not going to be able to show up to work and protect other people if they need to protect their own family and make sure that their own families are safe, that their own families have food and water and the essentials to live. So and even aside from that, even if all of the same number of police officers show up to work after SHTF, their capabilities are going to be greatly diminished, due to an interruption in electricity. There may be blockages on roadways due to, let's say, downed trees if it's a storm. Also, if it's a long-term SHTF situation, a lot of the police officers may not patrol regularly like they do now, or their chief or their sheriff may order the officers not to go out far away from their department, from their headquarters, just for safety reasons. Just because there's going to be so much chaos. Let's say there's like an EMP or some type of grid down situation, cyber attack, solar flare, whatever. They may order the cops, to stay close to, the headquarters, because if the police start to venture out too far, then they're far away from backup, and that makes them susceptible to being attacked, to being, ambushed, especially if it's a very rural location. It's much easier for a police officer, to get attacked or ambushed, so they may order them to stay close to the headquarters, close to the precinct, or close to the sheriff's office, and they may only let them go out for like serious calls, and that's in the best case scenario. If there's a total collapse of police services, and or maybe like a 50 to 75% reduction in the police services in your area, you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with people that are going to try to harm you. And, many times you're not going to be able to just, use deadly force on everybody, because they may not necessarily be a threat to your life at that point, or, for whatever reason, you can't just kill people, because they're breaking into your house. I mean, that's up to you. That's on your conscience, if it's legal in your area to do that and defend yourself, from a burglary. That's different. But, you may not, you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with people in that situation. And, you may have to detain somebody and keep them as a prisoner, so that way they don't come back and hurt you or your family, because think of it this way. Let's say you have somebody that breaks into your house, an intruder, home invader, or it may not even be that. It may be somebody who is snooping around, trespassing, or whatever. But, especially if there's an invasion, a home invasion, and let's say you draw the gun on let's say you draw your gun on that person, and you tell them, if you move, I'm going to shoot you or whatever. And let's say they comply with you. If you just let them go, how do you know that they're not going to come back and try to harm you, or try to, attack you again? Because they may have already gotten the layout of your home, once, because they were inside. They may have already studied your habits, how many people are in your house, what the domestic situation is. There a man in the house? Is it mostly a female house? Are there dogs in the house? Do they have some kind of security system? What's the visibility like in there? What's their the layout? So you're going to be much more susceptible to somebody coming back and trying to attack you again, or invade your house or your bug out location again, especially if the first time they were unsuccessful. And if you just let them go and you let them walk out your door, who's to say they're not going to come back with their friends and try to basically attack you with 5 or 10 people and surround your house with weapons and stuff like that. So in that situation, it might be a good idea to detain that person until the police can arrive. And if it's an SHTF situation, like I said, the police services are diminished, so it may take them a lot longer to show up to your doorstep and for you to hand that person over to them. It may take them an hour, it may take them 5 hours, it may take them a few days even. It may, if it's a really bad SHTF, let's say it's a really bad hurricane or some kind of storm or something like that, where the police are pretty much just going to be hunkered down. They're not going to really go out. They're not going to be able to go out. Then you're going to have to detain and hold that person as a prisoner for a few days. Especially if you're legally justified to do so. You may have to hold that person until the police can show up, so you can, press charges, and so that person can be, taken into custody and controlled, so that way they don't cause a crime again. So in that situation, you may have to take a person prisoner, and you may have to hold them for as long as it takes until the police or the authorities there. It may not even be law enforcement. It may not be local law enforcement. It may be some type of martial law. There may be a National Guard may come. So whatever authority is in place at the time, whether it's your local cops, your sheriffs, or state police, or it could even be, National Guard or some type of federal, security service, security organization that may take over law enforcement activities, especially if it's a martial law situation. If there's martial law, then the military will, be responsible for, taking people into custody and things like that. So, you're going to need a way to hold that person, and that's why I did the video about the restraints, and why they're so critical. and it's a very overlooked area of prepping, is having to detain someone and things like that. That doesn't cross the mind of a lot of preppers. Most preppers think that everything is going to be black and white, where somebody breaks into your house and you're just going to blow them away, put a few bullets in their chest, and that's the end of it. But in reality, that's unlikely. And if you did do that, you're going to have to answer for that. So you have to make sure you're legally justified in doing that, because SHTF won't last forever. It may be short term, it may be a longer term, but eventually the rule of law is going to be reestablished. So you have to make sure everything you do is legally justified. So this way, when rule of law returns, you can answer for all the things you did and not have to go to jail over it unnecessarily. So especially like same thing with detaining people and taking prisoners. You want to make sure you're legally justified to do it. You have to research and do your own research into what the law is in your state, as far as detaining people, citizens arrest, things like that. Every state is different. There are usually some common criteria, but you should be aware of what your rights are as a citizen and what you can and can't do. But pretty much you're gonna probably, if it's a long-term SHTF, you may have to detain someone for a short period of time until the police show up. And if we're talking about a total grid down, apocalyptic situation where it may be months, 6 months or more before any kind of law enforcement is established, and it's just total chaos out there in the streets. It's just a total apocalyptic type of world. Or it may not even be like an apocalypse. It could just be like a long-term SHTF. And in that situation, you may have to, if there's no police there to take custody of somebody and protect you from them, if there's no way for that person that tried to threaten you or harm you, if there's no way for the police to deal with that, then you're going to have to deal with that somehow. And the best way that I was thinking to deal with it, and it's kind of it's the best way to do it in my opinion, because it's not realistic to take someone prisoner and hold them in your basement for days or weeks, especially if it's like a SHTF. But if somebody's like a threat to you, let's say somebody broke into your house and you drew a gun on them and you told them don't move or whatever, you don't just want to tell them to get away, like I said, because they could come back. So what I would do probably is, if it's like a long-term, apocalyptic situation, is I would detain them, put them into flex cuffs, and then I would just drive far away from where I live somewhere, maybe in like a more secluded area, and I would just drop that person off, that criminal. This way they don't know there's less chance that they're going to come back and harm me, in the short term. If you drive and just drop them off somewhere, this way, it'll take them time to get back to, where they were in your town or wherever. That might be a way of dealing with them, but that's just total SHTF, apocalyptic type stuff. And then obviously if we're getting into like the apocalypse territory, and there's just totally no jails anymore, no police at all, then you may have to take prisoners on your own and stuff like that. But, if you're talking about the most likely scenario is that there's going to be a diminished amount of law enforcement and they're not going to be able to get to your house or your bug out location, particularly if you're in a really remote location. If you have a bug out location in like a very secluded area, like a lot of preppers do, and somebody tries to break in and you have to detain that person, or whatever the situation is, it's going to be a while before the law enforcement can come and arrest that person. So in that case, having handcuffs to cuff that person or restraints is really beneficial, because if it takes the cops an hour or two, that's fine. You could just keep that person, watch them and just, make sure that you give them water, whatever, and, just wait for the cops to take them, and that's pretty much it. And, and so that's why it's good to think about these things, and think about whether, you have the right tools, the right gear to detain someone if you have to. Typically you need some type of restraints. I did a video on some flex cuffs, and then also practicing may be helpful. Just practicing using them, and just reading about the techniques, learning how to properly restrain somebody without hurting them. You don't want to tie it too tight because you can damage their tissues. You can hurt their tendons and ligaments on their wrist, or you can do some damage to somebody. So you want to make sure you don't tie them too tight. You don't want to cut the circulation off, because that could potentially lead to criminal charges against you. Even if the person was trying to do serious harm to you and your family, you know how it is these days that they always try to find a way to hurt the common man. And there's been cases where people have lawfully defended themselves with a firearm or whatever, and you always hear about them having to go to jail afterwards or some other kind of repercussions. So you don't want to be in that situation. You want to protect your family and protect yourself, without being penalized for it. So make sure you learn how to use restraints properly. Do research on them. Don't just think that you're gonna get a pair of restraints and you know what you're doing. Make sure you don't tie them too tight, and just learn about the proper ways to use them, and think about how you would handle a situation like that where you have to detain somebody, because that's not something that a lot of people think about. Preppers especially, they always think that it's going to be very black and white, where they're either going to have to pull the trigger on someone and kill them, shoot them, or they're going to get into these crazy shootouts where they're going to be able to use their AR-15s and stuff like that, and it's going to be like a civil war or there's going to be a horde of looters and marauders coming in, and all those things are possible, but I would say it's less likely than the lone burglar, or some other type of small group of bad guys that are just looking to break in and steal supplies, and stuff like that. And in that situation, you may need to detain somebody and be able to control them until the police arrive. So for your safety and as well for your family's safety. So all right, guys, that's pretty much it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a little bit long, but it's an important topic, so I wanted to make sure I covered everything that needed to be covered. So take care, God bless, and I'll talk to you soon.